Okay, we are rolling. We are rolling, brother. Champions of Champions boxing talk here. Well, what an absolute war. What an absolute fight. Hats off to Shawn Porter and Errol Spence. That was a back and forth battle. I kind of knew this was going to be the case. There was a lot of people saying, although I did think that Shawn Porter would let off at some stage, but he went through the whole 12 rounds, even after taking a very flush knockdown in the 11th round. He still got up to his feet and fought on right until the bell. But a lot of people were saying Errol Spence would blow Shawn Porter out of the water, and I said all along, if Errol Spence could not knock out a 135-pounder, how is he going to knock out Shawn Porter? It just was not on the cards. Despite what the publicity says, it just was not on the cards in reality. And again, the reason Shawn Porter went down is another thing I said. Shawn Porter was right there, more or less leaning into the shot as Errol Spence landed. Double jeopardy. Let's talk about the actual fight, though. And it's not good reading for Errol Spence. Shawn Porter, now people are going to say, well, Errol Spence won the fight at the scorecard, so why are you saying this? Shawn Porter was supposed to be a blowout. The bookmakers had it so strongly in favour of Errol Spence, it's unreal. Right? They made Shawn Porter out to be just like an Arturo Gatti, just walking forward and just getting hit until eventually he was destroyed and taken out. Let's just say that was not the case tonight. I was absolutely disgusted because I did actually see the Fox feed of the fight. Every time Shawn Porter landed a glancing blow, the punch stat didn't count it. But when Errol Spence so much as brushed Shawn Porter, it counted. So the punch stats, I think, were very odd. That fight, to me, was even going into the round 12. Errol Spence needed that knockdown, in my opinion, in round 11. And do you know something? I don't know who won round 12. So what does that tell you? Very controversial what I'm going to say here. I don't think Errol Spence beat Shawn Porter, even with the knockdown. Now, it was that close a fight, you could have give it to Errol Spence, yes. A few swing rounds here, there. But that was no clear win. Conversely, if somebody gave the judge that gave the fight to Shawn Porter, I have no complaints. Had Shawn Porter got that decision and left the arena, the unified champion, no problem. He would have deserved it. Errol Spence was made to look human. Shawn Porter was turning him. He was hurting him to the body. He was buzzing him up top as well. He was landing frequently. I think round 4 it was the most shots ever landed on Errol Spence. But we have to remember Mikey Garcia never even bothered to throw a punch against Errol Spence. We also have to remember that Kell Brook at times was giving Errol Spence a lot of work. Can you imagine had that been a Kell Brook that hadn't have faced Gennady Golovkin just a fight before? That may have been a very different story. Right? Talk about Kell Brook. I thought Kell Brook actually handled Shawn Porter a little easier in some senses than Errol Spence. He was able to catch Porter very sharply when Porter would dart in. But Shawn Porter, to me, this was the style of fight that he wanted. Every time he wanted to close the space down, he could do it. Every time he wanted to bring Errol Spence in, Errol Spence walked in and Shawn Porter then brought him into the fire. Every time it looked like Errol Spence was going to annihilate Shawn Porter to the body, as I said, he'd spin off and turn it around and then he'd be the one on the ascendancy. Now, I do think that Errol Spence's shots did hurt Shawn Porter. But we are talking about a guy who is pound for pound material and is a 154 pounder. Let me just say this, I don't think Errol Spence on that evidence beats any of the top guys at 154 pounds. Also, after the fight tonight, it was announced that Errol Spence would next face Danny Garcia. So Manny Pacquiao will not fight Errol Spence. I think that's good news for Errol Spence. Call me Mr. Controversial tonight. Errol Spence is a good fighter, no doubt about it. A brilliant fighter. I'm not taking anything away from him. But Shawn Porter was hurting him. Shawn Porter is not a concussive puncher. He's a mauler. He's a brawler. He's a good mover. He's better than people think, right? But he doesn't always get full purchase on his shots because he's that close to you that it's hard for him to get full purchase. You know, sometimes he smothers his own work. And even when he does, if there's one thing Manny Pacquiao definitely is, he's a bigger puncher than Shawn Porter. Ask Thurman. Ask Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman found Manny Pacquiao's punches a lot more difficult to handle than Shawn Porter's. On tonight's showing, I'm not sure that Errol Spence v Manny Pacquiao would have left the ring the victor. In fact, there were times there I think Pacquiao may have iced him. Because Shawn Porter's hand speed is not as blessed as Manny Pacquiao's. Manny Pacquiao is better defensively. Do we honestly think that Errol Spence would have landed the same shots on Pacquiao that he landed on Shawn Porter? Now, of course, age could catch Manny Pacquiao any time. I've always said that. We have to judge him by a fight-by-fight basis. But if Manny is anything like Manny, Errol Spence, I think, has his work cut out. The foot speed as well. Shawn Porter was turning Errol Spence. Manny Pacquiao is a master at turning. Let's also take it to the account that Spence would be fighting a southpaw. Right? He wouldn't necessarily have a stance advantage in that fight. He would be fighting a guy who in recent fights against Keith Thurman, against Adrian Broner, against Lucas Matisse, who was really destroying those opponents' bodies. If Errol Spence thought that Shawn Porter's shots to the body was difficult, then Manny Pacquiao is something else. The only difference really is Manny Pacquiao isn't a mauler. He's kind of more of a boxer than a Shawn Porter. But he's still an aggressor. And I thought that Errol Spence at times was struggling to connect and find his punches with clear accuracy against a smaller guy. It was kind of difficult for him to punch down and land cleanly. It was much easier for him to do that against taller fighters, for instance. Pacquiao is also small and more defensively responsible than Shawn Porter, and more of a technician. And when he lands much truer than Shawn Porter. But tonight, there was a guy that left the ring the official victor. But the moral victor of this fight was Shawn Porter. Shawn Porter backed Errol Spence up, turned Errol Spence, fired to that body, fired to the head, landed some real good right hands right down the button. Errol Spence was struggling with Shawn Porter's hand speed. Right? What else? Some good left hooks. Errol Spence landed some good left hooks too. Errol Spence did some withering body work. Errol Spence scored, to me, that crucial knockdown, which on my card, he so badly needed. badly. And still, I can't decide who that 12th round went to. You can give it to whoever. Now, I know I'm probably going to get abuse from the Errol Spence tards. And this is not Errol Spence's fault. You see, networks build fighters up. So the question I'm left with now is Errol Spence overrated? He's achieved what he's achieved, no doubt. But for what the publicity machine says, yes, he's a little overrated. I'm sorry to say that, but he is a little bit overrated. That guy would not beat Miguel Cotto years ago, never mind Manny Pacquiao. The Miguel Cotto of old would beat Errol Spence. Antonio Margarito, back in the day, would have beaten Errol Spence tonight. He would. If he thought the fire was rough with Shawn Porter, and it is with Shawn Porter, everybody's saying it was going to be easy for Shawn. When has Shawn ever made a fight easy for anyone? This guy, Shawn Porter, you could talk about boxing skills. He did throw a very good, snapping short jab in there tonight against Errol Spence. Rocked him a couple of times, took his head back with punches, right? Shawn Porter is better than he's given credit for. Let's just put it this way. If Shawn Porter was the politically popular guy in the PBC stadium, stable I should say, he may be undefeated. Kell Brook fight was real close. Could have gone either way. Keith Thurman fight could have gone either way. Errol Spence fight could have gone either way. If he's the guy that the network is getting behind, he's undefeated. He'd have got the win over all of them. Floyd Mayweather has had fights like that because he was the money man, he got the victory. De La Hoya went to Floyd. Chino Madonna went to Floyd. Castillo, Floyd lost, went to Floyd. Shawn Porter's had a few of them go against him. Fights where he could easily have won have gone the other way. They're not robberies, but whenever Shawn Porter is in a close fight, don't expect him to get the decision. This is 3 times now. It's no coincidence. On to the subject of Keith Thurman. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What was Keith Thurman worried about all this time with Errol Spence? If Shawn Porter's punches were causing Errol Spence problems, again, Keith Thurman can do a thing that Shawn Porter, or he could do a thing better than Shawn Porter, and that's punch. And punch with true accuracy, not smother his work. What else does he have, which Shawn Porter also has? Good feet. Errol Spence's feet looked sort of sluggish to me tonight. Right? Shawn Porter's footwork was causing Errol Spence issues. So, Keith Thurman, I think had he had, and I don't know why that fight never happened, but if Keith Thurman has any belief in himself, after the Danny Garcia fight, which I think, because Danny Garcia does not put the pressure to the medal like Shawn Porter does, I think Errol Spence wins. And I don't think Danny Garcia wants to go into fire like Shawn Porter did. And I don't think Danny Garcia's feet are as fast as Shawn Porter's. Danny Garcia has to plant his feet when he throws shots. But if Shawn Porter can hurt Errol Spence, Danny Garcia might just be able to land a couple of shots which may pose questions. Because again, I think Danny Garcia is a bigger puncher than Shawn Porter. But if Keith Thurman had any confidence in himself, even today, he would not do as bad against Errol Spence as he thinks he would. The body is a problem. I accept that. The body of Keith Thurman, his body is like Amir Khan's chin, right? But if he can find a way to protect that body, he has speed, he has power, he has tenacity. He has power, more power than Shawn Porter. If Keith Thurman lands on Errol Spence must know about it. If he knew about it against Shawn Porter, Keith Thurman has more than enough to trouble him. The Keith Thurman that fought Shawn Porter, who knows? Maybe that Keith Thurman beats Errol Spence. I don't know. Not saying this one does. One guy I do believe that does beat Errol Spence is Terence Crawford. He's just too scientific for Errol Spence. It would kind of look like, I'm not being disrespectful, it would be a more competitive version of what Terence Crawford did to Jeff Horn. That's my belief. I think Errol goes the distance. Maybe goes the distance. But again, Crawford is such a sharp puncher and an accurate puncher. Errol Spence tonight was kind of leaning in against Shawn Porter, looking kind of scrappy. Can you imagine the opportunities a Terence Crawford would have of landing a variety of punches when Errol Spence is leaning in with his head and chin down like that? I think Crawford's IQ, ring IQ, footwork, all of them things is just a little bit too much for Errol Spence. And I think he makes Errol Spence look very awkward indeed. Put it this way. Does anybody think that Kell Brook beats Terence Crawford? That's a guy that Errol Spence was going life and death with. Now, I know styles make fights, but just think about it. Does anybody think that Shawn Porter, as good as he is having that amount of shots landed on Terence Crawford? Maybe he does land a few early, but as the fight goes on, Crawford closes the show. He shuts the door. The floodgates are not open. Errol Spence was taking punches throughout that fight. Does anybody think Shawn Porter gives Terence Crawford the same sort of competition that he just gave Errol Spence tonight? I'm not sure. I don't know about you, but I don't think Shawn Porter does. I think Shawn Porter gets beaten soundly, stylistically, by Terence Crawford. I think if there is, again, it won't be easy. Shawn Porter is there for all to see. You have to separate him from this planet. You have to separate his senses from this planet. And nobody's managed to do that to stop him. But I think Terence Crawford could be the guy that clearly beats him, gets an actual unanimous decision, at least, that we all agree on. The other three fights we can't agree on. There's somebody that always sees it Shawn Porter's way. The Brook fight, the Thurman fight, the Spence fight. I didn't see Spence winning. That last round, again, I can't call it. But as right now, when you can't call a round, you call it even. So that, for me, is a draw. And the draw come with the knockdown. Does Errol Spence deserve the win? Yeah, he could, again, swing rounds, and Errol Spence has done the job. I hope this also puts to rest the thoughts of Errol Spence going up to middleweight to fight Canelo Alvarez. If his punches could not stop Shawn Porter, Mikey Garcia, Shawn Porter, who is very front heavy and is there to be hit at times, and Mikey Garcia, who is, effectively 3 weight classes smaller than Errol Spence, he has no chance of stopping a Canelo Alvarez. In fact, if Shawn Porter's punches and Kell Brook's punches bother Errol Spence, I see Canelo Alvarez piecing Errol Spence up to head and body. He stops Errol Spence. He does. And he stops him within 8 rounds. Canelo Alvarez is just too sharp, too strong, much more heavy-handed than anything Errol Spence has faced, and I know Canelo could take Errol Spence's punches without blinking. Canelo Alvarez took shots from Triple G. Telling me Errol Spence goes up there and annihilates Canelo Alvarez. These are the things that the Errol Spence fans have been trying to tell you. I'm telling you, it's nonsense. It's not going to happen, right? Just put that into perspective. And if Shawn Porter, who is smothering his own work, is buzzing Errol Spence to the head, what do you think Canelo Alvarez would do? Errol Spence is a front foot heavy fighter. That plays right into the hands of Canelo Alvarez. And you know something? He's too brittle for Canelo Alvarez. He's too brittle. He's too physically brittle. Canelo would break him piece by piece. The bodywork would just be withering. And Canelo Alvarez, they talk about Errol Spence's boxing ability. Look at Canelo's. There's a ring IQ there. There's a counter puncher there. There's a combination puncher there. There's a guy with fast hands there. There's a guy that can carry the weight there. Right? Canelo Alvarez would do such a bad job of annihilating Errol Spence, he would never be the same again. It even makes me wonder, on watching tonight's performance, how Errol Spence would do against an individual like Jarrett Hurd. I think he may struggle with a guy like that. You know, I was a bit concerned watching Errol Spence. I was disappointed that he didn't stop Mikey Garcia, and I said tonight would answer the questions about Errol Spence. They haven't. I've still got this thing in my mind that says this guy is a fantastic fighter, world-class, elite for his time, but you just get the impression that if you throw him in the Maypac era, Floyd and Pacquiao would have their way with him rather easily, right? Also, you go up to that top pound-for-pound upper echelon list. I don't think he sort of belongs there with Lomachenko and Terence Crawford. I think they've just got too much on him. I think they're too complete for him. I think there's too much guile for him. I think don't get me wrong, he can box, he can fight, but compared with them, he's very basic. I don't think he's as great as Usyk. This is just one man's opinion, but that is what it is. But because there are frailties with Errol Spence, yes there are, that made tonight's fight a great fight. The bookmakers, Teddy Atlas, God bless him, thinks that Errol Spence is heaven sent. Freddie Roach was saying, oh, Shawn Porter will just be blasted out there. I knew very well that was not going to happen. Why? Because I didn't think Errol Spence was the Superman that Freddie Roach, Teddy Atlas, and many other people think. Dare I say, if the PBC see a new kid on the block comes up in the middleweight the welterweight division, he could take that division in his grasp and dominate. But Shawn Porter has proven tonight he's as good as any of them. Not named Terence Crawford. And possibly Manny Pacquiao, you know. But again, Manny Pacquiao will still be competitive to this day with Errol Spence, going off the evidence I've seen tonight. Errol Spence would have to elevate his game. If he was there to be hit with the same shots, don't forget, up close, Pacquiao has a great right hook, right? And Porter was catching Spence with fast stabbing jabs. Pacquiao throws fast stabbing jabs too, right? If Errol Spence comes in as reckless at times, he was following the brawler tonight. He was brawling with the brawler, and at times he was coming out the worst for the wear in them exchanges. If he fights Pacquiao at his own game, Because Porter was able to slip the Errol Spence jab, Pacquiao can slip a jab. Tonight's version, square on, waiting to be hit. No one's telling me that Manny Pacquiao's straight left hand, which is one of the very premier punches in the game, wouldn't hurt Errol Spence. Pacquiao only has age to fear against any of them. Any of them. It is what it is, in my opinion. But for me, Shawn Porter was the moral winner. Errol Spence, congratulations. But, you know, tonight was about perspective. I enjoyed the fight, but when the dust settled, if I didn't know who Errol Spence was, I'd think, what a fantastic fight and what a gallant effort by that guy with Shawn Porter. But because they've made him out to be the second coming, there are questions in my mind. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the fight. This is Champions of Champions Boxing Talk. I'm out, brother.